fantastic. But hey, we're about to start a new series called Beyond Belief, so why don't we just check out this quick little video to introduce it. Ooh. All right, hey, there's often two chains of thought that can be going through people's head when they watch a video like that. The first one is this: wow, God is incredible, He's amazing, I can't believe all He's done. He is awesome, right? And be full of awe and wonder. Otherwise, you can watch that and you can sort of be sitting there going like, really? I don't know, like, it seems a little far-fetched. Like, did that really happen? I can't make sense of it. I think this is weird. You Christians, you guys believe anything, right? Those are sort of, I think, the natural reactions that can happen when you watch a video like that. And the reason we're doing this series, Beyond Belief, is because we want to lean into that tension a little bit about miracles. Because, hey, we read about them. So some people have experienced them. Well, I'll ask people in the minute to raise their hand, but I think a lot of us have asked for them, right? Like if you think back in your life, have you ever been in that place where you're asking for a miracle? Maybe you were asked to God. Maybe you didn't have a faith in, but you just kind of like you needed something to take place and you didn't know who you were asking, but you just like threw it out there. Maybe you're like, I don't know who God is, so I'm just going to throw out like every God that I can think of. Muhammad, Buddha, Allah, Jesus, whoever you are, please help me out because you've been desperate. Like maybe you're a teenager and you were going home and you knew that if mum or dad saw you the way that you were that night, maybe because of the time or because of how you were behaving, you were in deep trouble, maybe because of what you were wearing. And so the whole way home, you were just praying, God, please let mum and dad be asleep. Please let mum and dad be asleep. Just let me get from the front door to my bedroom without running into anybody. Maybe that's a prayer that you prayed. Maybe you had an exam to go into and you knew that you were totally unprepared for it. And you just, please get me through this. Maybe you found yourself in a massive financial situation, a big mess. Maybe because of our own fault, we've brought too much stuff and we didn't have money for it and things are looking real bad. We say, come on, God, if you're there, if you just help me get through this, I promise. And oftentimes when we throw out some of these prayers, it can be like an I promise on the other end of it, right? Like, if you do this, then I'll do this. Maybe it's a lot more serious than that, right? Maybe you were up all night, a lot of nights just praying, God, please bring my parents back together. Maybe you had a sick friend and you were praying for them. Maybe you spent night after night after night with tears rolling down your face because one of your parents was really, really sick and you're just praying and asking God for a miracle to heal them. Come on here, let's put our hands up. I'm here. Who's asked God for miracles? Who's asked God to perform miracles? I think pretty much everyone at some point has asked God to intervene and to perform miracles. And it can leave us in this real interesting place, right? Because on one hand, we kind of know God can do it, and on the other hand, He doesn't do it every time we ask him to do it. And we're going, what's going on? Does God really love me? Does God really care? And so what we're going to do over these 4 weeks of the series Beyond Belief is just talk about that. We're going to lean into the tension. We're going to have honest and real and authentic conversation. And what I'm excited to do, I'm just going to read a little part of a story each week over the 4 weeks that I believe is really, really quite cool. But as we launch into the series, as we kick it off, I want to just begin with this idea and then this thought around and talk around the relationship between miracles and Christianity. Because it's, as we saw in the video, those stories are all miraculous and they all come from the Bible, and you don't have to read much of the New Testament or the Old Testament to see miracles take place. So let's talk about the relationship between miracles and Christianity. And I think that the easiest place to start, the big question to start with is this. Do you have to believe in miracles to be a Christian? Do you have to believe in miracles to be a Christian? And the truth is, even just bringing the subject up there, there's some people in the room that are like really excited. Yes, we should be talking about it. We need to talk about this way more. And there's other people in the room that are thinking, like, what are you doing talking about this? This is crazy. This is weird. And that's why we want to talk about it, because we just want to be real people who talk about real things in a real way and just walk towards the tension that's here. So, do you have to believe in miracles to be a Christian? Well, let's just firstly define something. Okay? Let's define what a miracle is. What makes a miracle a miracle? Because there's a lot of things out there, and it's a word that we'll throw around today. Oh, that was a miracle, that was a miracle, that was a miracle. But just so we're all on the same page, let me define what a miracle is. Here's an academic definition that comes from a man called Norman Geisler, and in his book, Miracles in Modern Thought. And again, this is quite wordy, and academics, you'll love this. I've got a simpler one in a moment. Here's a miracle defined by Norman Geisler. He says, a divine intervention into, or an interruption of, the regular course of the world that produces a purposeful but unusual event that would not or could not have occurred otherwise. Just slow this down a little bit. It's divine intervention. There's something that's come in, someone beyond has intervened into, or there's been an interruption of the regular course of the world. And regular course pretty much just means the laws of nature that exist, of the world that produces. It's got to be a purposeful. So God would intervene for a reason. It won't just perform a miracle to show off, but generally there's a purposeful. But an unusual event. Why? Because it's contravening the regular course of the world or the laws of nature that would not or could not have occurred otherwise. Here's a slightly simpler definition. It's not as good, but sometimes simple is better, I think. And miracle defined simply would be the temporary suspension or reversal of the laws of nature. The temporary suspension or the reversal of the laws of nature. When we look at the world today, we'd say, hey, that the way that the world works, it's observable and it's predictable, and it's observable and it's predictable, it's observable and it's predictable. This is where scientific thought comes from, right? We can observe something, and what happens continues to happen if the same thing happens. That if you throw something up, it's going to come back down. You can predict what's going to happen because the world is observable and it's predictable. It's led scientists to come up with like the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, the laws of biology. These laws make sense. It's the fact that the world is predictable and observable is what makes science a reality. And you go to some places and they'll say there's a real tension between science and religion. But I'd suggest that there is no tension whatsoever, there is no conflict at all between science and Christianity. And I talk about science and Christianity because if you talk about science and religion, well, there's so many types of religion. Of course, some of these are going to be conflict and it's not going to work together. But when it comes to Christianity and science, there doesn't have to be any conflict whatsoever. In fact, if you go and do a little bit of research and a little bit of study, and one of you will actually do this, but if you go and actually look up who some of the founders were of the modern science movement, you'll discover that most of these people were followers of Jesus. That most of them were asking the question, how does God do it? It's phenomenal. You go back and look. Who were these people that have really pushed science in this direction? And you'll find that most of them are followers of Jesus. Even the guy who wrote the book on the theory of evolution, Charles Darwin, his thing starts with, to God be the glory. Most of the scientific minds were Christians. And then the reason that they were like this was because they looked at the world and they said, hang on a minute. Well, what we see is observable and it's predictable, and observable and predictable. Well, what the other thought was, and this is if you go back to the names of around the groups of people around when the Bible was written, the pagans, they would say, well, hang on, there's all these different gods, and the things that happen on earth are essentially a battle of the gods, and the gods at their whim can do what they want. And so if the God of rain decides it's going to rain, it's going to rain. If the God over here decides that's going to happen, that's going to happen. And so the gods kind of dictate it, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. But people actually said, hang on a minute, now there is rhyme and reason. We can explain things. There are certain laws that hold true. The law of gravity, if we throw something up, something's going to come down. The law of thermodynamics, all this sort of stuff, it's all true because the world is observable and it's predictable. And so for a miracle to take place, there has to be something where these laws are suspended or those laws are reversed. In my house, we might say, wow, it's a miracle because one of the teenagers really cleaned their bedroom. I've got to check this. Yeah, I've got to check this. We talked about this yesterday. If we go in there today and it's done, we could say, well, it's a miracle. Well, it's actually not a miracle. He's got hands, he's got legs, he can move stuff, he can tidy his room. Just doesn't happen very often, right? But we might say it's a miracle. Well, we might... I don't know if maybe you're driving a car and you wouldn't do this, but the person next to you might. Right, where you're just going a little bit too fast and the conditions aren't too good. And all of a sudden the car spins out and you're spinning, and you stop right next to a lamppost and you look out and you're like, whew, that was a miracle I didn't hit that lamppost. Well, it's not a miracle. Because the chances are, if you did all the physics and you did all the maths on that, you stopped exactly where you were meant to stop, given the forces and everything that was going on at the time and the friction on the road and stuff. But, if you were driving and your car spun out and was heading straight towards that lamppost, and somehow that lamppost got lifted up and was just hovering above your car, and you looked up and said, wow, and drove your car forward, and then the lamppost went back down into the ground and stayed there, that's a bona fide miracle. If that happens, please ring us, let us know, take a photo, because that would be phenomenal to see. But a miracle, to actually be a miracle, requires the temporary suspension or reversal of the laws of nature. Otherwise, it can just be incredible timing. It can just be very fortunate. It can be very lucky. But it's not a miracle. So do you have to believe in miracles to be a Christian? So yes, you absolutely have to believe in miracles to be a Christian. And what I want to do is I want to talk about two miracles. I think if you want to be a Christian, you have to believe in these two, at least these two miracles. But here's what's really interesting. If you believe in the first miracle, and I think, and I'll show you this, I think every single person actually believes in the first miracle. Then all you actually have to do is believe in the second miracle, and you can be a Christian. And if you believe in the second miracle, it actually opens the door to the possibility that all the other miracles are true. And I'm not saying you have to be able to explain them. I'm not saying you have to be able to rationalize them or take someone through an account of how God did it. But I think if you say, hey, that first one's a miracle, and yep, I think that's a miracle, that then opens the door to say, well, okay, the second one, a little bit harder to get, but I believe that one, then you can, I think, believe in the rest. So what are the two miracles? The first miracle is this. The first miracle is the birth of the universe. The fact that the universe was birthed is a miracle. As Christians, we believe that God created the heavens and the earth. that he spoke it into being, that he was a creator who miraculously created the earth and the universe and all that we can see and touch. Okay? And if you're not a Christian or you struggle to believe that, that's totally fine. But what most people would say, including all the scientists that argue against Christianity, that they'd say, and I think it's the word of Richard Dawkins, is that the singularity, that it was the singularity that caused the universe to begin, that it happened outside the laws of nature. In fact, it was the birth of the universe that actually birthed what we now call as the laws of nature. That this beginning of the universe happened outside the laws of nature, is in conflict with the laws of nature, that it supersedes the laws of nature, which therefore makes the beginning of the universe a supernatural event. And everyone would say that the universe had a beginning. The universe had to have had a beginning. And here's how you know this to be true. And you guys, some of you already know this, and some of this will just blow your mind a little bit. You can figure it out in the cafe afterwards. But the universe had to have a beginning, because if time just went back infinitely, like to infinity, then we'd never actually arrive at this point now, because time would just keep going back forever to infinity, and you can't just keep going back and back and back and back, because there'd never be a domino that you could knock over that would bring us to the point that we are at right now. That makes sense to some of you, but like if there's like infinity time going that way, you can never get to where we are right here at this point in time. So the universe had to have had a beginning. And here's what you know to be true, right? Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe and the laws of nature had a beginning, therefore they had a cause. We, as Christians, believe that cause was God. And if you don't think it was God, that's totally fine. But when you just start to question yourself on this and ask yourself on this, you don't think that the universe created itself, do you? Because something that preceded itself cannot create itself. If you think this is true, you're saying, well, then nothing created something. And if nothing created something, well, then that's a miracle. So either God created it and it's miraculous, or nothing created and it's a miracle. So however the universe started requires a miracle. You can't get around that everyone believes at some point that there's miracles taking place that's created the universe. And that's one of the two miracles you need to believe to be a Christian. And everyone believes it. There's a guy, and I'm trying to remember what his name is, but he's got a book. I think it's Rodney Stark, and he's got a book called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist," because he says it takes more faith to believe that something came from nothing, essentially, than that it was created by a higher being who sits outside of time. So the first miracle we have to believe, if we're going to be a Christian, is that there was the birth of the universe. And I think pretty much everyone, when they really think about this, believes this. And then the second miracle, which means that if you believe that miracle took place, doesn't mean that the second miracle is out of the realm of possibility, because you've already said there's a miracle here, which I think means that the second miracle could well have taken place, and I believe it happened. But the second miracle you need to believe if you're going to be a Christian is that Jesus rose from the dead. You have to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. You can't be a Christian without believing that Jesus rose from the dead. And that is a miracle. Because everyone else who dies, or we've ever seen die, stays dead, right? It's a miracle if someone's been dead for 3 days and then they come back to life. And what makes Jesus' miracle even more profound and even more pronounced and even more incredible was Jesus predicted he was going to die and come back to life, and then he actually did it. And I'm quite a simple person. And if I ever meet anyone else, or I hear a true account of someone else who died, who before they died said, I'm going to die and 3 days later I'm going to come back to life, or 5 days later, whatever it might be, and then they actually die and pull it off, I'll probably believe everything they say too, because that's got quite a lot of credibility behind it, okay? But I've never ever seen that. No one else has ever done it outside of Jesus. And some people say, well, how else do we know that this miracle actually happened? I haven't got enough time today to take you through all the evidence for this. But what I can tell you is this. We covered a little bit of it last week. There is more historical evidence that Jesus rose from the dead than there is for a lot of things that took place in history from that same time period and prior to. In fact, I'd put it to you that there's more historical evidence that Jesus rose from the dead in terms of the number of accounts that were written, the way that these accounts have been copied, the way that people have been able to go back and read the historical documents. This stuff far exceeds the accounts for Jesus rising from the dead than for some of the things that took place. And last week I used the example of Alexander the Great. There is so much evidence out there for the fact that this miracle took place. And so to be a Christian, you have to believe in miracles. You can't get around it. You cannot be a Christian and not believe that the universe had a beginning and not believe that Jesus rose from the dead. But here's where it gets really interesting. Here's where it gets really, really cool. If you believe that the universe had a beginning and you believe that Jesus rose from the dead, it opens up the door to the possibility that all these other miracles that we can't understand, that we can't fathom, can be 100% true. And we don't simply believe that because it's written in the Bible. Well, we don't simply believe it because, these were the pages that got bound up and put together, and these were the books that got put together, so we have to believe everything that they say. We believe everything that was written in the Old Testament took place because Jesus gives it credibility. See, when Jesus was on the planet, he didn't talk about the Old Testament because when Jesus was on the planet, there was no Old Testament. There was what Jesus refers to as the law and the prophets. These are the writings that make up the Old Testament. And Jesus referred to it as the law and the prophets because at that time it wasn't old. It was like, this is what the people believed. And so we see Jesus time and time again refer to the law and the prophets, the law and the prophets, the law and the prophets. So if Jesus, who rose from the dead, gives credibility to everything that's written in the law and the prophets, then we should too. Well, what's really interesting about this is at the time when Jesus was on the planet, none of the Gentiles, none of the people outside of sort of the Jewish population cared about what was in the Old Testament. They're like, who cares? That's the Jewish thing for the Jewish people. That's their books. That's their literature. They read it. But after Jesus died and was resurrected, a lot of people, a lot of the Gentiles started to pay interest and start to read and start to look through the Old Testament. They wanted to get to know it. They wanted to understand it. Why? Because Jesus gave it credibility. We believe the Old Testament, not because it's been bound up with the rest of this, but because Jesus gave credibility to the writings of the Old Testament. I believe all those miracles that we saw on the screen took place, not because I can understand or rationalize or scientifically tell you how God did them, but because Jesus gave credibility to them. And I have confidence that Jesus rose from the dead. So if I can trust him on that, I think I can trust everything else that comes out of his mouth. This is fascinating, right? The first miracle, everyone, pretty much all of humanity is going to believe. The second miracle, that takes a little bit of faith, that takes a little bit of trust. I want to do some research, I want to understand that. But hey, when I get to the place where I believe that miracle is taking place, it opens up the door for me to believe every other miracle that's in here. So if we continue, what's the relationship here between miracles and Christianity? I couldn't help but just talk about this, the danger on both sides, the danger on both sides. And when what happens, and this is where some of the tension comes from when it comes to miracles. If we could just go to the next slide, please, man, that'd be awesome. Awesome. And what we have is there's some people and some lines of theology that are over this side, and they'd say that, hey, God no longer performs miracles. And this is a really, really, I think, dangerous place to be able to say, hey, God no longer performs miracles. Do you know why this is a dangerous place to be? Because if you're saying God no longer can perform miracles, you're really saying, well, God isn't really God, is he? If God really is sovereign, if God is above all of us and above all of what we do, surely he has the power to perform miracles. So as soon as we say, hang on a minute, God no longer performs miracles, we're saying, God's not really God, he's not really powerful, he's not really in control. So being over this side is I think it's a really, really dangerous place to be. The reason some people come here is because they've been asking for miracles, they've been wanting miracles. Like some of us, we've been praying and asking and praying and asking. We just haven't seen God do what we wanted him to do. So it's easier to change our theology than wrestle with the tension of, why can I believe this but not experience this? And so they get to a place they say, no, God can't do miracles today. And that is a dangerous, dangerous place to be. But then down this end, which is just as dangerous, you have people saying, well, if God's not performing the miracle, it's because you are the problem. God performs miracles if you just had more faith, if you just lived a more holy life, if you were just more righteous, if you really believed, God would perform the miracle. And that's a really, really dangerous place to be. Because what we're going to see is, as we go through the series, and in particular next week, we're going to see people that God loved not get the miracle that they wanted. And if you're here and you're in this place going, well, what's God doing? How come he performs a miracle here but not there? Next week's the week for you. If you've been praying for something over and over and asking for God to perform the miracle and you still haven't seen it, can I suggest that week 3 is the week that you want to be here? But as soon as we start pointing fingers at people and saying, hey, the reason God's not performing the miracle is because you don't have enough faith, because you're not holy enough, because you're doing things wrong, man, you get into a really, really dangerous place. And there's some people that teach some of the stuff that actually do really, really well financially. And the way they do this, and as humans, we're kind of drawn to this a little bit, is because we like to think that we can manipulate God. We like to think that we can control things enough so God will do what we say. And the way this works, and they even make it this simple and this stupid, but they kind of will tell you, hey, no, they'll write a book on this, or they'll do a teaching on this and go around and teach this in a whole lot of places. And people will be like, whoa, you're amazing, can we buy more of your books? But it's just nonsense. Because what they say is, hey, here's a formula that we can give you that will enable you to manipulate God to get him to give you the miracle that you want. And here's an example I've used before. It's really stupid, and they don't make it this obvious, but there'll be someone who will say something like this. Hey, if you really want the job of your dreams, if you really want it with great pay and everything you could want, what you need to do is read the book of Job because it looks like Job. Okay? And if you read the book of Job every day for 7 days, and then you pray this prayer, you're going to get the job. And then what people do is, they go, really? Oh, because some people don't use their heads much. You should always use your head. They'll read the book of Job, every day. I'll confuse myself. They'll read it every day for 7 days. And then they'll pray that prayer. And out of all of those people, 2 of them will just somehow get the timing will be right. They'll get a job that day. And they'll be like, wow, it works. And then the person will be like, see, told you, they did it. They were the only ones that faithfully read every single word. That's why they got. And then it will go bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's got nothing to do with that. It's just fluke. Coincidental. But that's how it works. It's a really, really dangerous place to be. And so if you're down this end, you're saying God can't do miracles. If we're down this end, we're saying, hang on a minute, God's so small that we can manipulate him with our words and our actions and what we do. Come on, that's just crazy. And my hope and my prayer and my challenge as we go through this series, as we continue to talk about this, as we continue to live a life of faith, or maybe trying to figure out faith and what it's all about, is that there will be the sort of people that will always ask God to perform the miracle. That will always have that conviction, that belief that God can. And I can take it to him and say, God, can you please? God, can you please? God, can you please? That my heart will never get so hardened, that my brain will never get so close to the idea that God can perform the miraculous because I haven't seen him do what I want in the past. And I'm always going to ask him to do the miraculous. But at the same time, I'm going to realize that I cannot manipulate God. That he is the one who is sovereign, that he is the one who is in control, that it is his will, not my will, that I should be praying for. And if he says no, and if he says maybe later, he says just slow down a little bit, my faith isn't going to run off on me. I'm not going to give up on it because I trust. I trust that him whose thoughts are higher than my thoughts, him whose ways are higher than my ways, knows better and can see what I can't see right now. I'm not going to get into the danger on that side, and I'm not going to drift into the danger on this side either, because that's what can happen in this space. And like I said at the start, each week as we go through this series, I want to just read a short account of a lady's life. So this is a true story, and I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Don't go home and Google the end of the story. Because it'll be so much better if we can unpack this together over the next 4 weeks. And I've just put that idea and someone said, you're going to go and Google the story. You suck. I don't like you anymore. But I do love you, because I kind of have to. But let me tell you this, and we'll just unpack the story as we go, okay? It's pretty amazing. It's about a lady called Joni. It says it was a hot July afternoon, which tells you they clearly don't live in New Zealand, in 1967. 17-year-old Joni was everything you'd expect from an active, athletic teenager. She loved horses, tennis, swimming and hiking. Life was full of possibilities. She was heading to college in the fall, had a boyfriend, and felt invincible in the way that only teenagers can. That afternoon, Joni and her sister Kathy decided to cool off with a swim in the bay. The water looked inviting, murky, but refreshing. Without checking the depth, Joni hoisted herself onto a raft anchored offshore and dove in headfirst. In that split second, everything changed. Her head struck something hard underwater. The bottom was much shallower than it appeared. She felt a strange electric shock shoot through her body and realized with growing terror that she could not move her arms or her legs. Floating underwater, unable to surface for air, she watched helplessly as her arm draped over her sister's shoulder when Kathy pulled her to safety. I couldn't feel it, Joni would later recall. I knew then that something awful had happened. At the hospital, the devastating news was confirmed that Joni had fractured her fourth and fifth vertebrae, that the 17-year-old athlete was now a quadriplegic, paralyzed from the shoulders down. In one instant, one dive into water that looked deeper than it was, Joni's entire future had been rewritten. The college plans, the dreams of marriage and family, the simple ability to brush her teeth or feed herself, all of it was gone. But this was just the beginning of her story. What followed would be a journey of faith, desperation, and ultimately a different kind of miracle than the one she'd spent years praying for. As Joni lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling she would see for months to come, she had no idea that her real battle was just beginning. The broken neck was devastating, yes. But what would nearly destroy her wasn't the paralysis itself. It was what she would discover about prayer, about faith, and about the God she thought she knew. The fight for her soul was about to begin. Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, it's true that pretty much every person, irrespective of what they believe, has cried out, has reached out to someone or something at some time because they needed a miracle. And God, we know that you are capable of miracles. And Father, I know that we can't understand and we can't explain how you do things, where those laws of nature are reversed, where they're sort of suspended for a moment in time, but we know you can do it. And so, Father, I pray that you'd help us be the sort of people who always believe, have that conviction that you can, and continuously ask you to do it. And I pray that you'd help us to keep our faith strong and real even when you don't. I pray you'd help us not to have our hearts hardened so we give up on asking because of what we're experiencing. But we also will just know that you're a God who always can and could and hopefully will do those miracles that we're asking for. I pray, Father, you can help us to embrace this tension so well, that you are a God of the miraculous. Yet so often our prayers seem to go unanswered. I pray you can help us to wrestle with that, to bring it together, to let it move our faith forward and not remove our faith from us. I pray this in Jesus' name. Everybody said, amen, amen, amen.